And now, please welcome CEO of United Airlines, Scott Kirby, in a conversation with Skift Editor-in-Chief, Tom Lowry.
Good afternoon, and welcome back, Scott, to a Skift forum. If you recall, the last time we spoke in person was on stage in Singapore.
I do remember. Seems like a lifetime ago.
Skift Forum Asia on Memorial Day of 2019. Now, that was 16 months ago. I know it probably seems like 16 years or 16,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
But as I recall from that conversation, things looked pretty good back then.
Yeah.
United. Since then, you became CEO of the company in May, confronting what I guess is the worst crisis in modern aviation history. It's an auspicious entry to the C-suite. Just tell us how you're managing right now.
Well, it's certainly not what I thought the job would be when I was announced back in December, where we were focused on growth and improving the customer service and continuing to improve the morale and employee relations started under Oscar's great leadership. But the reality is that the coronavirus pandemic has made the job infinitely more meaningful and important because now, instead of focusing on those things, we're focused on the health and safety of our employees and our customers, but importantly, on doing whatever it takes to make sure that we save the 100,000 jobs at United for the long term and get back when this is over to growth and get back to supporting the communities and customers, many of whom are sidelined right now, but get back to that. But making sure you survive the crisis makes the job a lot more meaningful than it ever could have been before.
Now, you appeared on an investor conference on March 11th, and you spoke in pretty frank terms about the gravity of the situation. You weren't pulling any punches. It was a stark assessment. What were you seeing then that maybe others in the industry weren't, or were there reasons for that candor back then?
Well, partly I think I can admit, I guess, that I'm a nerd and a science nerd for a long time. And over the last weekend in February, when we saw it begin to appear in northern Italy, it seemed inevitable almost to me that the genie was out of the bottle and that it was worldwide, and it was already circulating worldwide. We hadn't really seen it in the U.S. yet, but it had to be circulating. And, because it was, up to 2 weeks gestation, highly contagious and asymptomatic transfer, all of that meant that it was almost certainly going to be a global pandemic. So we expected it to be much worse than everyone else was predicting at the time. I'll tell you what we didn't expect. We didn't really think the world would shut down. We thought revenue would be down 70%, that a lot of people would stop, but that the world would not go into lockdown. That was a little surprising. But really from there, and then by the end of the March, once shutdown started, it has developed largely right in the middle of the fairway with what we were expecting. I wish we'd have been wrong. I wish it had been a lot better. But that has certainly made it easier for us to plan and be in a leadership position on getting ahead of some of these issues and taking active steps, before many of our competitors did.
Now, the airline industry got some aid from Washington. You're in D.C. today talking about some more aid. Where do things stand? I understand there was a meeting with executives with Mark Meadows, who's the White House Chief of Staff, and some intense lobbying with Congress.
Yeah.
Where do things stand now as we face the October 1st deadline, which could cost a lot of people their jobs?
Yeah. So, look, first I'd say huge kudos to everyone in Washington, the administration, the Republicans, the Democrats. There was a broad bipartisan support back in March that really saved the economy. I think we were looking at a terrifying situation without everything that the Congress did and that the Fed, and frankly, did as well to support the economy. And aviation is a critical part of that. And what's unique about airlines and aviation is we're not just about the 100,000 jobs that are at risk at airlines on September 30th if there's not an extension. We're also a much broader economic magnifier for the places we fly, whether it's business travel trying to get places, or if you're in Orlando or Las Vegas, the whole economy is dependent on getting people there. And we fuel the jobs of people that work at those restaurants and those hotels and really across the board. We're an economic magnifier. And that's why it's important that airlines get get an extension on their relief. Because the other thing that's unique about airlines is if we cut and start furloughing employees, pilots, mechanics, people with certifications that begin to expire, or you retrain pilots into the wrong seat, it can literally take years to bring all of that back up. So it's much broader than just 100,000 jobs. That's a lot that are at risk in aviation. But the ability of the economy to come roaring back once there is a vaccine, it's going to take a vaccine. But once there is a vaccine, the ability of the economy to come roaring back will really be fueled if airlines are at full strength and ready to go, from 50% to 100% overnight.
Now, there's a lot going on in D.C., obviously. Now we've got the Supreme Court nominee battle. If a deal does not get done and there is no aid by September 30th, October 1st, what does that look like in terms of furloughs, layoffs at United?
Yeah. So at United, it will be 16,000 direct furloughs. There are another 25,000 employees that are on various voluntary programs where they're still on the pay. They're still officially working at United, but they're not getting paid. So the impact is broader. And then, of course, there are all the indirect impacts. And for the airlines in particular, September 30th really is a deadline because come October 1st, the furloughs at United and at others are going to happen the next day. And unlike some other businesses, we really do have a drop dead date of September 30th. And so we're taking one last shot. You're right. It's tough here in DC right now because there's so much happening. Right. But taking one last shot at getting something over the finish line.
Well, the prospect of that must be hard for you to imagine. What does United look like as a smaller airline? We spoke to Ed Bastian this morning, and he said, I never plan for smaller Delta, but in the near term, that's what it's going to be. So when you think about a smaller United, what does that look like? How does that feel like? And how quickly do you rebound?
Yeah. So we're right now we're flying, about 45% of our schedule. And frankly, I think it probably stays that way until there's a widespread vaccine, which I think is probably the end of next year. I hope it's earlier, but I think it's probably the end of next year. And so we're probably about the size we're going to be for the next 15 months. That's a guess because it'll of course depend on the course of the coronavirus and the vaccine and customer confidence, frankly. But that's our best guess. Once that happens, we do think that demand will come back, and we at least hope that we'll be able to come back to where we were before and get back on track to growing in our communities. It's still an open question. There's a big question about is business travel ever going to come back? And so some of those questions are yet to be answered. But that's where we think we're headed.
So you've been, unlike your competitors, you've been pretty prudent about adding back capacity until you see real demand. Has that thinking changed at all?
It has not, and we're today, we're flying at 45% of our schedule, but we're still flying load factors that are 50% approximately instead of 85, and prices are down 30 to 40%. So revenue, while everyone tracks the TSA passenger count, whatever that is, revenue is 40% worse than that. And in a world where we just reaffirmed that we're going to burn approximately $25 million per day. I mean, it's just a remarkable number in cash. And by the way, I think that's better than our other large competitors are doing. But it's just it's an apocalyptic environment for airlines and for aviation right now. And so trying to chase market share when we know that demand is not coming back until there's a vaccine just seems like a way to burn extra cash.
It seems like the airlines that are in the best shape are the low-cost carriers that are selling a lot of domestic economy seats right now. I mean, you've had the opposite strength in the past. Your bread and butter was selling international business class seats to executives at Apple or Facebook or at pretty big margins. So, what are you doing to try to counteract this decline in that business?
So first, I'd say I'm incredibly proud of the people of United Airlines for the job they've done during this. You're absolutely right. When you just look at what's happened, the decline in international, in premium demand, and the decline in coastal hubs, Newark, San Francisco, far worse than the rest of the system, as an example. You would have expected United to have the worst results. But the reality is that if you take our cash burn, relative to our size pre-COVID, we're either the best or almost the best, even compared to low-cost carriers who are almost exclusively domestic airlines. Our cash burn is, relative to our size, is the same. And we've done that through an incredible amount of creativity. We added cargo flying as one example, and, grew cargo revenues 43% last quarter. We're starting some point-to-point flying to Florida, things we would have never done before the pandemic. We're adding new service to Accra, Ghana, and Lagos, Nigeria, Johannesburg, Bangalore, places that have a lot of VFR traffic.
I wanted to ask you about that because you've been particularly proud of your hub strategy.
Yeah.
Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Denver growing, DC, Houston. These would seem to me not to be the sort of domestic cities that are getting the most traffic right now. I may be wrong, but talk a little bit about how you shift that hub strategy.
So at least while we'll go through the coronavirus, because our hub strategy, a lot of it was predicated on business demand. Our hubs are in the biggest business markets in the world. That's always been a strength of United, and it's going to be a strength of United 2 years from now. But during the coronavirus, it is a handicap compared to what others have. And so we've moved relatively more capacity into places like Denver that have a lot of business traffic normally, but also have a higher degree of leisure traffic, and importantly, a lot of connecting traffic. The bigger connecting complexes you can build at a hub, the more traffic you can carry. And the second thing we've done is migrate our capacity out of business markets and into places where people are actually flying now, leisure markets. So, our capacity to Cancun is almost flat compared to what it was before. And if Hawaii ever opens up, we actually might have more capacity to Hawaii than we had before, us and everyone else, by the way. But adding service to Lagos and Bangalore and places like that were on our list, but they fell further down our list because there were just so many business opportunity markets. And this gives us a chance to start those markets now with mostly VFR traffic, but we'll be in the market, we'll be prepared. And when business traffic does start to come back, we'll be there and ready to accommodate those customers. And those will be permanent additions to our route network that, would have been deferred had this not happened.
How important is the loyalty program been to you throughout this? I know a lot of, including United, I guess, and Delta have sort of leveraged that to raise financing. Talk a little bit about the strategy with loyalty.
Yeah, our loyalty program, is probably the crown jewel at United Airlines. An incredibly valuable program for our customers and keeping our customers close and connected to United, but also financially. And we got a great partner in JP Morgan Chase, who we re-upped a new deal with them. Ironically, on the last Friday in February, right before all of this started. But we've been able to, use that program to raise financing. We did a first of its kind. No one in the world had done it before, where we raised $6.8 billion in financing against that program, really in the depth of the crisis, when no one thought they could even see the light at the end of the tunnel. And Delta, I guess, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And by the way, we copy things they do too. So, but they replicated the deal, and by going second, actually, they were able to do an even bigger deal at $9 billion. So they're really very valuable programs, but the value really derives from the relationship that we have with our customers, and having that close relationship, just creates a really valuable entity for them and for us.
So I know a lot of people that have put a lot of miles on their cars these past few months because they have been afraid to get on a plane. So let's talk a little bit about safety and safety protocols.
Yeah.
We had a really interesting discussion this morning at our presentation of Skift Research in partnership with McKinsey, where they talked about this sort of 50-50. 50% of the people were willing to travel, 50% were not. Those 50% that did travel, 80% of those that did felt more comfortable traveling again.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about some of the protocols, cleaning protocols, and safety protocols you have in place.
So this is another one that I'm proud of United for a leadership position in the industry. But by the way, we don't try to compete on safety. Anything that we're doing, we proactively tell and are willing to work with any other airline anywhere in the world, because safety is about taking care of people, not about competing. But from the beginning, we were one of the first airlines to start rigorous cleaning protocol. We're maybe the only airline that is still doing a full cleaning protocol between every flight, a full electrostatic spraying between every flight. We were definitely the first airline to require masks for our employees, customers willing to ban customers. And back when we did that, by the way, it was controversial. I got a fair bit of hate mail from people about requiring masks. And while it's obvious to everyone today, or almost everyone, that wearing masks is the right thing to do to slow the spread of the coronavirus, it wasn't when we first did it. We had, but I think the most underappreciated point about aircraft and safety is the airflow on airplanes. The airflow is designed to come from the ceiling to the floorboards, back through the ventilation system, goes through 50% of the air goes through HEPA filters, 50% from the outside, but recycled every 2 to 3 minutes through MERV 17, something people now know what MERV filters are. MERV 17 filters, HEPA grade filters, every 2 to 3 minutes. There's literally nowhere on the planet that you are getting circulation like that outside of an airplane.
Been put in place just since the pandemic, or was that existing?
That was existing, and that was existing because if you go back and read the research, and I'm also an aviation nerd, so I had done this even before. The aircraft systems were designed decades ago to stop the spread on board airplanes of airborne infectious diseases, explicitly designed for that, and making it hard for diseases to transmit. And we've been doing a lot of research with DARPA, the Department of Defense, Harvard, Boeing. So I have a lot more than our team tells me I can't tell you all the details yet, but I have a lot more knowledge about this even than I've described. Right. And the facts are stunning. How safe an airplane is. They're stunning. I feel completely safe on board an airplane personally. My wife, who's pregnant, feels completely safe. There's a lot of places she won't go, but an airplane is one of them.
We have an audience question, Scott. Where are we at in creating travel corridors with testing?
That's another one of these things that is a little frustrating because everyone thinks it's a great idea and wants to implement it. But somehow we just can't get it all the way over the bureaucratic finish line to start. I am hopeful. I think the country that we're probably closest with is Great Britain, and be able to start a New York to London travel corridor. My fingers are crossed that we'll get that done because we can do that in one place and inspire confidence. So much of this is about confidence. Then we can start opening up other parts of the world, and there is increasing testing becoming available that really could start opening up the world and help economies. I mean, look, if you're in Hawaii, in theory, they're going to allow October 15th. Hopefully they will. But I can't imagine what it means to the economy in Hawaii, which is so tourism dependent, has essentially been shut down for 7 months now.
So we're going to have an audience poll where we're going to come back to this question. If you fly, do you feel more comfortable after you've flown for the first time since the pandemic? So stay tuned for that, for the results of that, Scott. Let's shift gears a bit to something that challenges that all of us are facing right now in terms of trying to be companies that are more diverse, more inclusive, more socially just. What are you doing at United on those efforts right now, particularly since this past summer?
It's a great question. It's incredibly important to us at United. In the first week of March, before all of this started, I spoke at our leadership conference, and I talked about, that the vision 10 years from now, where we're going to be. And I had 3 big initiatives, and this was, of course, it was the beginning of March. One was about sustainability, 2 was about air traffic and reform, and the third one is about diversity and inclusion. So even predating this, it was the current furor. It was a high focus for us at United, and this is one of those that I tell our team that I recognize I don't have all the answers. It's one of the challenges. Somebody in my shoes, in your shoes, who hasn't grown up with the same race, prejudice, racism, the same issues. It's hard for us to internalize and know what it means, and it's hard for us to solve those issues on our own. So at United, we're focused on trying to find ways to take action. Before the coronavirus, we had 2 programs that I was really proud of. was Aviate, which is a program where we were going to train pilots from the ground up, and 50% of our pilots entering that program were going to be diverse or underrepresented groups. And the second one is a program called Year Up, which anyone that's listening, I would encourage you to get involved with. And they're a great organization, charitable or nonprofit organization that helps kids, young kids, get a foot on the ladder at companies. You get these great people who just never had the chance to go to college on their own and never get on the first rung, and you can get them there. And some of the future leaders at United are going to come from those groups. Those are a couple of the examples. But there's a long way to go. And we got to focus on action instead of just talking about it.
It would also seem like the airlines really need to focus on the leadership of the companies. United said they plan to add a second Black member to the board of directors.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you have any news for us today or want to announce.
I won't have news on that until we put it out into a press release. Michelle Hooper, if I could, one of the things that's amazing about that to me is this really is so much about access and opportunity and forcing yourself to go look. I was first when I was started thinking about who would I nominate for that. I was having a hard time coming up with names. But then you go off and you force yourself to go look. It's amazing how many wonderful, fully qualified candidates you find. You just have to take the extra step to go outside of your normal network. And that really is, at its core, one of the biggest issues here is getting outside of each of our own networks and forcing ourselves to go broader.
Okay, and I should get Michelle Hooper is the lone Black member of the United Directors and also the second female on the board.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. What about sustainability and green carbon efforts? Do they just go by the wayside in a sort of revenue-strained environment like this, Scott?
No, this is another one that I said was one of my top 3 pillars for the long term and I'm passionate about. And frankly, I think, while it may not be obvious, it's going to be more important after the pandemic, faster than it was before, because increasingly, this will cause us to recognize we are part of a global society, whether we like it or not. We are. And we have to solve global problems with the whole globe. We can't solve it one at a time. And to me, sustainability is even more important. But what I think is important is that we focus on sustainability and that we focus on making a real difference. And to be blunt, carbon offsets are not the way to make a difference. Even in the best of cases, it's going to be less than 1% of the world's carbon. But the best of cases aren't even true. Many of these carbon offset programs are bad for the environment. We saw one at United where someone was pitching us on a carbon offset program that they took your money, burned down the rainforest in Indonesia, and built a palm oil plantation because the palm oil counts as an offset. And the only way as a planet we're going to solve this is to do the hard solutions for renewable energy, sustainable fuels, and carbon sequestration. And if you're talking about offsets, they're easy. They're perhaps good marketing, but you can just write a check for, but they are not making a difference.
I mean, we've taken the position at Skift that it's a lot of lip service.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you agree with me. But I mean, it really is. And if you're into the science of it, and you go look, like some of these projects are so frustrating that you see counting as carbon offsets. They're literally bad for the environment, and they count as a carbon offset.
So as I got ready for this interview today, I tried to look across the landscape of CEOs at public travel companies, and you've been in position fewer months than anybody at a travel company in the same. I think Peter Kern went in at Expedia in April, but you're a seasoned operating executive. What are the lessons or what was unexpected that you learned from the top perch these past 5 months?
It's probably so different for me because of coming in during the coronavirus. But one of the things that I've tried to get people to focus on that was a little surprising to me is that people treated me different when I had the CEO title than they had treated me before. People that I'd known for 20 years. And the truth is, I don't really think of myself any different. And so I have spent a lot of time focused on getting people to make sure that people are telling me what they really think. And one of the things that I think I've had to change to make sure that happens is keep my mouth shut more often. I'm not doing a very good job of that today, but different setting. Keep my mouth shut and make sure everyone else talks, because you realize that once you're the CEO, once you express an opinion, it gets harder for people to disagree with it, and that's a loss. If you don't hear everyone's perspective, and you don't hear everyone's views, there's nobody that's perfect, or nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, myself included. And it's important to hear from everyone. And I guess I knew that before, but seeing it in action makes it much more stark.
I think that's a great message to end it on, Scott. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tom. Good to see you again.
Well,
Hopefully in person next time.
Right, definitely.
Good deal.
Count on it.